Welcome to UX Research Geeks, where we geek out with researchers from all around the world on topics they are passionate about. I'm your host, Tina Vipkova, a researcher and a strategist, and this podcast is brought to you by UX Tweak, an all-in-one UX research tool. This is the 49th episode of UXR Geeks. Today, we are diving into the fascinating intersection of business, research, and innovation with the founder of Sharp Insights, author of Make Products That Matter, and seasoned expert in research, Chloe. We explore how to make compelling business case for research, navigate innovation processes, and speak the business language that gets stakeholders on board. Plus, Chloe shares actionable insights on turning research findings into impactful strategies. Tune in. Chloe, we are going to talk about business language, business approach, and how research should make a business case, and how innovation and research is helping innovation. Mm-hmm. But before we go into that and repuzzle it, I would like to know, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in the UX Tweak podcast. Really excited to be here. So I have a couple of hats that I wear. So I'm a founder of Sharp Insights. So that's my own company. And there I am an author of Make Products That Matter. So I've got the book here, actually. Don't know if that's the right way around for you, but yes, that's Make Products That Matter. Also, I'm a speaker and trainer as well.
And spying on you a little bit on LinkedIn, you basically have a market research background, if I understood it well, right?
Yeah, so my background in research is quite mixed. So I've got a background in market research. So I did have my own consultancy, I can't remember how long ago, called Formalized Curiosity, and that focused on market research. I was really interested to learn about competitive research and just lots of stuff in the world of market research, really. And then after that, I went into social research, and then I went into user research. So I've been involved in lots of different types of research, but I find that having been in lots of different types of research and also have done my PhD and learnt all the background, the philosophy of research, I can come at it from lots of different perspectives. So down to the sort of almost individuals for users, but also looking quite broadly when you're looking at it from a sort of sociology, cultural kind of perspective.
Mm-hmm. And how did that happen that now you are more, hard to say if it's the right wording, but more working in the product and innovation space? Because I understand that you guide companies and clients, stakeholders, this whole innovation processes. So how did that happen?
I was just, when I worked at the Transport Systems Catapult, that's where I discovered human-centered design, user research. I just really found it really fascinating. And that's where I learned a lot about innovation as well. And then after that, I worked for an AI product studio. And that's where I got into grants and applying user research to creating the AI assistants and things. And then after that, then I co-founded a grant writing and research consultancy. So I was involved in lots of different points in the product development journey. So sometimes right at the very beginning and figuring out who the users were, through to working with marketing companies to understand much more around what companies were standing for and the value that they were providing that fed into their brand. So I've been involved in research with so many different organizations that when I put all the pieces together, I was able to book. But also, having worked within the AI company, I was also involved in developing products right from the very beginning, as well as working on existing products. Yeah, so now I work with companies to help coach them, really, to help them through that journey. And also from a grant perspective, to help them get as much out of grant funding, really, by explaining much more about what innovation is, because there's lots of different types of innovation, and guiding them on how to create projects that they'll get a lot from if they win the grant funding.
And I would maybe start with diving into the topic with the question of how do you explain to the stakeholders why is research important?
I think once they've been through the process, they realize how important research is. But getting them to even begin research can be a bit challenging, particularly when I was working through that co-founded consultancy that I mentioned. There are so many reasons why not to do research. It took a long time. It was expensive. It wasn't a priority, etc. So the way that I explain it for businesses to get research into their organization and their product development process is by explaining what the benefits are. So by building a product and then putting it into market and then getting feedback is the most expensive way of building a product, really, because you might have spent hundreds of thousands on developing the product, and then you're waiting right to the end to then get user feedback. And then you might not get a lot of feedback, you might just get complaints and requests for different features and things. So by taking more of a fail fast, learn quickly type of approach, it means that in the long run, you're saving quite a lot of money, but you're getting the benefit of having all of that customer feedback right at the very beginning of the process rather than at the end. So Maze did some research, I'm not sure when, but I think it was quite recently. And they said there has been research that it has 2.3 times better business outcomes. It reduced the time to market by about 4 times. It increased revenue about 4 times, improved brand perception about 3 times. And I just find that really fascinating, because if you go to market quickly and you can improve your brand perception much better and quickly because you understand your customers, so you can talk to them much more directly, and you can increase your revenue because you're selling a product that people need, then it just seems like a bit of a no-brainer, really, to use research.
Very interesting, because I love hearing these numbers, because I think this is the first time where I actually hear it in numbers. And a lot of stakeholders, product managers, or product owners, which are even more technical people, they suffer more under the quantification bias. And this is, even if you are talking about it, like amazed of, oh, okay, this is really speeding up things, and this is really the number. So I would like to thank you for finally hearing the ROI of research being summarized as well. Topic where researchers, we talk about it, we want to have this, and we want to speak the business language, but we struggle with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think with researchers, explaining what their ROI is can be difficult to quantify, like you mentioned. This came up in a coaching session recently. And I think if you can compare what would happen if there wasn't any research, then what could the trajectory have been, and what difference did you make? If you can maybe make some assumptions as to maybe what might have happened and then compare, then you might be able to see what impact that your research had. So it might have been much better able to determine who their user groups were. So that meant that they could target their marketing much more clearly, or they're building features have had user feedbacks, then they're more likely to succeed compared to not having any user feedback at all. So it can be difficult to quantify, but I think if something's gone to market quicker, then that means that the revenues come in faster. So that there might be different ways of quantifying it from a business perspective, because particularly if they want to get things out there quickly and then sell things quickly, then the ROI that I mentioned, those are the kind of things that they focused on.
And is this quantifying something that you would say is summarizing a little bit the need for researchers speaking the business language, or would you frame it, and how would you frame it as what is the business language that the researcher should be speaking?
Really thinking about the commercialization and having that business mindset, I think, is important. So language is part of that, but I think it's the approach that you can take. So if you were to put a business case together because you wanted to do some research, then it's understanding what your stakeholders are looking for from that. So it might be that they want to identify innovation opportunities to stay competitive. It could be that they want to, maybe they're not doing any research on the product at the minute. So it could be explaining why research would be good on that particular product. So it might mean that they can go to market faster. Then it's more likely to meet customer needs. So then they'll have fewer complaints and the churn rate will be much lower. So they're looking at it more from that perspective rather than particularly what the users want, such as ease of use, etc., which is important. But for a business, sometimes they want to get things out relatively fast. But if it adds a lot of value, then you can iterate as you go.
And you, as a market researcher from the past, in the past roles, or a researcher with mixed experiences, have you ever been struggling with the business language? How did you come to the need of, oh, I should be speaking the business language?
I think I had an entrepreneurial mindset since a young age, because way back, I think when I was about 13, I started my own business. I've always been interested and fascinated by growth. So what I've done is I've taken people on the journey with me. So I worked in an organization where they hadn't done any research at all on a product that they were developing. And in that scenario, I took the stakeholders on the journey with me. So I involved them in the interviews, explained the importance of product management, which then saved them money because we could be very clear as to what things needed to be done and then set a specific budget to things. So then that helped them manage their cash flow and things like that. So I think that really helped, but it wasn't in a relatively small business. I think once they've done research and I've seen the benefit of it, I've never seen any guesswork again after that. I think that it means that they're more likely to do research again in the future.
And as you now work in the field of innovations, how research helps you to identify the opportunities. And as you were mentioning your experiences, I'm also a little bit keen to learn what kind of research helps you with it.
In this report about research maturity, they found that only 3% of companies really use research in their strategy. But I think if user research could be used by the leaders to feed it into their strategy and identify innovations which could help them become competitive, then that's going to be a win for everybody, really. And what was your second question? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm guilty of asking two questions at once. That's
okay.
Long I do the research. I always do this. And the second question, what kind of methods or which type of, I'm hesitant to say which type of research, because for me, also UX research, it's based in market research originally. But what methods are helping you with identifying the opportunities?
I would say there's a lot in interviews. I get a lot of value from doing interviews and really deep diving the problem space. So what are the challenges that they're having? What are their current workarounds? What do they wish existed? What products do they currently use? How are they finding them? So then you can figure out if their competitive products are meeting the needs, because they might not be. And then things like that can start to uncover opportunities for innovation, because you can start to find the gaps, particularly if you ask them, what do you wish existed to help solve this particular problem? And then that can give some really interesting insights and ideas as to what gaps are out there.
Do you maybe have an example from your praxis?
Yes. What we usually do is hypothesize as to what we think the problem is. And then we come up with lots of assumptions. And from these assumptions, we create hypotheses. So I was working on one project where the hypothesis was that in a particular scenario, they thought that they needed really complex analysis to figure out their progress and understand their bottom line and things. And then when we went out and did the research, it actually transpired that the customers really just wanted very simple analysis and simple data. So that was an interesting finding for that company, because they were about to spend a lot of time and effort with this really complicated analysis and lots of APIs and things to feed into the AI things. But the customers just didn't need that at all. That was almost too much. And that was something that maybe could be much further down the line. So that was really interesting for the company, because it meant that we'd identified the gap, but also the problem wasn't the problem that they thought existed.
Listening to the arguments that you are giving the stakeholders, giving them the numbers, how they could be more successful, taking them on board, and then you saying, oh, there is no further naysaying to research. Is there anything else that you would mention? Oh, this is important to onboard people on research.
So as stakeholders, getting them on board with research, what else apart from taking on journey? I think if I've made that business case that it will help make the product like better fit for the customer needs, and if it's going to help their company, I've taken them on the journey, maybe some funding. So sometimes a research blocker can be there's not enough time, it's too expensive, etc. So sometimes just having a small grant or pitching for a particular amount of money, if that's possible in an organization, then that can help, because then that's earmarked for that particular activity. But that's what I found helped really when I was running the consultancy, which is why we mixed grant writing with research, because money was a big blocker. But then as soon as they had grant funding, then they would spend lots of money really on doing really good quality research that in the long run save them a lot of money and a lot of time.
Makes total sense. Yeah. And I'm wondering, because what I experienced in companies was that the way that the actually getting people on board with research, getting them to do research and serve them with research, or even doing the research with them was happening. But where I was a little bit struggling in some companies, in some it was very straight ahead, was the implementation of the insights into the work. So how do you make sure that the insights are well implemented and brought to reality?
I think right at the very beginning, understanding what it is that they're trying to get from the research, so then you produce the outputs that they need. Because I think that there is it could be quite common to create research reports, but there are lots of other ways of presenting findings. For example, recently I used a Miro board. I mapped out a process. I made it very visual and interactive. And I found that the leaders of the particular company, they really liked that, because they could move things around. They could see with affinity diagrams, have the themes by grouping all the Post-it notes together. So with the names of the themes, they could go into it. And what I'd done is on the Post-it notes, I'd copied and pasted some of the transcripts. Then they could see some of it brought to life. So that was a format that I found worked really well, because it wasn't a report. But in other scenarios, when I've worked with developers, they like to have user stories and outputs in different ways, so they can implement it. Yeah, that's really going to annoy me what that's called. But yeah, they like to have user stories, so then they can put everything on their Trello board or whatever they're using, and then create the ticket, and then we can implement things that way. Sometimes a presentation. Sometimes I do that for myself, just so then there's a detailed document. And then from that, I might do it like an infographic, or I think video clips work really well as well, if there's like a highlight reel. Yeah, I think it's the outputs that helps with the implementation of it. And also working with the key stakeholders to see what are we going to do next, and maybe create something like an improvement project out of it. So then if it's for innovation, then it's something that's running in the background, but it's really clear as to the roles and responsibilities. You've got regular communication. So it's almost like a project managing it, but internally.
I'm wondering, you as a product person, or as I wouldn't say generalist, but somebody who is a person with a renaissance product manager, I would say, and having this research hat on, and then going into the role of writing user stories or facilitating the whole process of how they come to the result in the sense of product. How do you navigate this?
Yeah, I think because I've been in so many different roles before. Yeah, I've been in lots of different roles before, from being a researcher, being an entrepreneur, being a product manager, being in a leadership position. So I feel like I can chop and change my hats quite frequently. I'm used to working on different things at the same time. So I can be a product manager 1 minute and then work on a project the next or grant or something in the next minute. So I think that's the thing with researchers actually, which came up in another coaching session, which is almost looking at skill stacking, because research is really important. But I think that if you're able to have other skills as well, then it just makes the job market maybe a little bit easier if you're able to enter it with another skill set.
I always, when I'm mentoring younger professionals, say that having this additional skill set and having the ability to guide clients or stakeholders, internal environment through the process is giving them extra strength. But I also understand that some researchers are very strong in, I want to just deliver my report, whatever form it has, and I want to stay objective. I would like to close with the question of what will be your advice for people who are a little bit hesitant into moving into this project management and into this facilitating of processes, innovation processes space?
I would say that research is a team sport, and I think it can be good to get stakeholders involved and to play almost a coach, because your skills are always going to be needed, and you're always going to need someone who can make sure that research processes are being put in properly, that you've got a research that everything's ethical, best practice. So I don't think anyone can take those skills away, but it can be beneficial to have different perspectives, but also they become the experts too and users. So then you don't have to argue so much and advocate so much for them, because they're almost on your side and you're taking them with you. So I think, taking that coaching approach and having those skills can be really useful.
So if I were to summarize, it's speaking the language, the business language, showing the proof of how it's going to help, launching products in the speed or in the high of the revenues, having this coaching mentality and approach. Is there anything else we forgot about or you would like to mention?
I think it's having that business mindset and keeping the stakeholders on your side and making sure that you have buy-in. So think about what it is that they're needing from the research as well.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your examples. I find it super interesting and how much experience from different fields you have. I love it. I'm a very same, I would say. Yeah. Where could people follow you and your work?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I think it's /sharp without an E, Chloe, CHLOE. And I have a company which is Sharp Insights as well. And I've got a book which is Make Products That Matter.
Great. Thank you very much for spending time with me.
Thanks very much for inviting me. It's great to see you. Great to meet you.
Thank you for listening to UX Art Geeks. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support is really what keeps us going. If you have any tips on fantastic speakers from across the globe, feedback or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to geekspodcast@uxtweek.com. Special thanks goes to our podcast producer Jana Filoshova, our social media specialist Daria Krasovskaya, and our audio specialist Melisa Danishova. And to all of you, thank you for tuning in.